What's up, podcast world? We're back. Chad Belding, This Life Ain't For Everybody podcast. Got another good one for you today. We got to send a shout out, always thanking our partners that believe in our culture. Living off the land, knowing where our food comes from, hunter, fisher, gatherer, conservationist, being a provider. I don't care if you grow your own beef, your pigs, your chicken, you hunt with a bow, a crossbow, a slingshot, a shotgun, a rifle, open sight, scoped. It doesn't matter. Grow a garden, be a hunter, be a fisher. I love to eat it all. I like to know where my food comes from. And we always got to send a huge thank you out to Jack Daniel's Tennessee Sour Mash Whiskey for bringing our listeners another episode of This Life Ain't For Everybody. They're our title sponsor. Enjoy it responsibly. Never allow underage drinking. I've been enjoying just a couple little sips of Jack Daniel's during the 2021 Major League Baseball playoffs. I don't watch a lot of TV. I love to watch baseball live. But when you're on the road and you're trying to film a bunch of hunts, I've been watching our boys Walker Buehler and Will Smith and Justin Turner and Gavin Lux with the Dodgers take on our good buddy Austin Riley and his Braves counterparts. 3-1 right now. We'll see what happens tonight. And over in the American League, we got Boston and Houston. It's going to be a heck of a World Series, no matter what two teams prevail out of the NLCS and the ALCS. And today's episode of This Life Ain't For Everybody podcast is also brought to you by our good friends and family at Leer Toppers. You know how much we travel. We're all over. Back roads, dirt roads, highways, byways, flyways. We're going from Canada all the way down to Mexico, every state in the continental United States, chasing ducks, chasing geese, chasing turkeys and elk and deer. We have a lot of good, solid gear that we travel with, both in our trailers and in our trucks. And we depend on Leer Toppers to protect us with security, keeping our dogs safe, keeping all of our gear safe and secure. There's nothing better in the world than peace of mind, knowing that when you pull into a lodge or a hotel and you lock that truck up with one push of a button, everything locks and you have double security in so many ways. So thank you, Leer, for believing in the culture of the American hunter, gatherer, provider, fisher. Like I said before, there's not a better lifestyle in the world, in my opinion, than living off the land. And today we have a guest that works with the TAG group. He loves Leer. He loves Snug Top. He loves Bed Slide. He's got a wife. He has 4 boys. My mom, at 21 years old, or 22, had 3 boys. I can't imagine. I have a 10-year-old daughter. I can't imagine being 22 with 3 boys. Well, our guest today, Nate Day, has 4 boys with his wonderful wife, and they have an awesome story and a great way of living. I'm very interested in it, and I'm glad that we have him today. My brother, Nate, how are you?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you very much for having me out. I definitely appreciate getting a chance to talk with anybody in this, environment, industry, culture, and all that kind of stuff. So it's awesome being here.
You have a lot of Instagram accounts, and I want to get them out of the way. And obviously, I don't cheat a lot on these, Nate. I don't take a lot of notes. I don't rely on notes. I try to freestyle everything that happens on all of our different podcast formats, but I don't want to get these wrong. I want to make sure that everybody understands at some, just the word, not when you're adding numbers up, but SOME, someday adventure. No S on adventure. Someday adventure. At someday I'll learn. ILLLEARN. So 3 L. Someday I'll learn. And then his third Instagram account is at Someday Dad. And you can follow Nate and his family in what I would just call their adventures, their experiences. They're writing stories. First off, I got to ask you this. I read somewhere on one of these pictures or something looking at on your accounts is that this is a all year round lifestyle cycle, correct? These kids are on the road with you all year round. I assume there's a lot of homeschooling going on. When you put the word someday I'll learn, you guys are learning a lot about life together, but is there actual schoolwork being learned on the road, Nate?
Yeah, we'd get in a lot of trouble if we didn't teach them anything. I mean, I'm sure there's some people out there that might consider that the way to go. But no, my wife is very much into education, as am I. The Someday I'll Learn portion of what we're doing actually started with just my wife, Chelsea, and I, in which we kind of started off with our endeavors as a newly married couple. We both met at UCLA, where I was playing football for a long time. And she wanted to go into full-time writing, and I was a photographer. And we just kind of started with there. I became a deputy sheriff in San Diego, and I worked there for about a decade before deciding to leave that. And the whole point of all this, and it started with Someday I'll Learn, was to just experience and express like all the things you do when you start a family. You know what I mean? Everything from just putting together a household, a home, what makes a family, and obviously all the little nuances like cooking and adventure and stuff like that. And since then, we branched off into Someday Adventure, which is definitely more focused on just the adventurous lifestyle. And in and of itself, that evolved. You know, it wasn't just about traveling places or seeing different things. It was, you know, the outdoors and feeling and tasting and everything that you can do out there, which definitely led into hunting and things like that. And then Someday Dad is purely focused on my perspective as a father in those adventures and things that we do. Mostly because Someday Adventure became very truck oriented. I mean, once you get an audience of like 17 to 35-year-old males, when you show a picture of your kids, they kind of like switch off in their brain. They're like, no, not for me. It's not, you know, the guns and the trucks and the hunting and the fields and the streams. It's a kid. So that's why I developed that one. So that's kind of where it started from. And we spent a ton of time on the road. And because we pulled our kids out of public school, and we were doing that in California, which is, as you can imagine, we're refugees, if you will. That's the joking term.
Oh yeah,
the California lifestyle.
You have a great governor, though. Let's get that out of the way.
Yeah, he's awesome. Unfortunately, my last boss of sorts, you know, the top of the food chain, was our current vice president. And I don't want to get into that, but let's just say that when she was the attorney general for California, a lot of what they say is true, you know. But
yeah, I know.
I don't want to talk politics. That's just stupid.
I understand. We just had to get it out of the way. Yeah. I just like to take a temperature once in a while to make sure that we're on the same page. Because when you said refugees, I was like, yeah, I live very close to California. You know, I'm 15 minutes from the border and on 2 different locations of California. So,
well, yeah, you see a lot as a cop, and you realize how ass backwards. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. You can say whatever.
Donkey backwards things can be out there, and it just doesn't make any sense.
So, did you quit being a cop?
Yeah, I retired. I retired myself out after about 10 years. So
because of some of the culture going on and some of, you know, the friction of what's going on, or the current climate of law enforcement?
Actually, no, to be completely honest, not entirely. No. My sister-in-law was killed in a drunk driving accident, and my wife just couldn't deal with that grief by herself. So I said, I need to take family time. And that bled into, you know, using the other things as an excuse, the culture and stuff like that. But I never had a problem with anything that happened on the streets, on the beats and things like that. You just kind of accept that for being what it is. You wouldn't ask like a military veteran, did it bother you that the people that in the countries that you went to didn't like you? No, it doesn't bother anybody. It's the job you're doing, you know? Yep. So that was never a problem. I like that, but it was more of a family personal decision at the time, and it was convenient.
Well, I'm terribly sorry to hear about your sister-in-law, your wife's sister. I can't imagine that, you know, life happens, but man, it's just, we gotta cherish it. This is, we're very, very lucky to have, I think, an average of 77 years for a female and like 73 years of a lifespan on Earth. It's a drip, man. It's like a blink of an eye, and I feel for y'all. So I
appreciate that.
You, are a football player.
A football player.
You were a football player. You played for the Bruins. We have some mutual, Pete Savage, or John Savage, who's the brother of Pete from Reno, Nevada, is the head baseball coach for UCLA. Yeah. I've played in Jackie Robinson Stadium. My brothers played in Jackie Robinson Stadium. We both played baseball at UNLV, and we would travel 3.5 hours south to LA to play against the Bruins. We'd go to Cal State Fullerton and Long Beach State and San Diego State, all over there. So college athlete, you graduate, and you said you played football for a long time. This isn't like a Tommy Boy story where you're there for like 7 or 8 years, right?
No, I did the 5, which is
what I did.
A question for people like, what? Yeah, they were like, "Why 5?" When you talk to a non-athlete, I was like, "Okay, listen, there's something called redshirting."
Redshirting.
You have to explain. They're like, "You mean you failed?"
And you're getting educated actually in photography. You're like your degree is in photography.
No, oddly enough, I was a political science major. I wanted to learn about war, so I emphasized in international relations. My wife did that too. I was thinking about being a lawyer, and then I found out that sucks for family life, apparently. And so I was like, well, where can I use my brain and all this legal knowledge and stuff like that I really, really dove into. And that's how I ended up being a cop, kind of, because I didn't want to go indoors. I spent so much time as an athlete outside, you know, I just couldn't imagine the cubicle life. And so I was like, all right, I'll just go problem solve on the street. And that wound up being really beneficial. And then The photography thing I actually did on the side as a gift from my dad. He got me a camera when I was in the end of high school because I liked that he took pictures, and he did it as a hobby. And when I was in LA, this is a funny side story. I started shooting for a Los Angeles magazine that was a conglomerate of a couple local magazines. And are you familiar with Richard Simmons? The
Sweating to the oldies, buddy. Sweating to the oldies.
Yeah, I have a photo of him. I did a photo shoot of him for the cover of the magazine, and I was doing this all for ad space because they didn't want to pay me. So they paid me, like, I got a full page ad for doing the cover. You know, like, you can advertise your photography stuff. And I was like, I'm a football player. What am I going to do with that? And so I got really creative, and I exchanged that to local businesses for camera gear. So I'd say, hey, you can have my full page spot. I need that hiking camera bag. And they'd be like, okay, cool. And that's how I acquired my camera gear through college. You know, being an athlete, you're not supposed to make money. So I actually was just doing transactions for ad space. So that's what got me into it.
That's a little iffy with an NCAA violation, buddy. I'm going to have to look into this.
They can look into me if they want to. They still owe me money for the video games. So they can give me my money first and then look into that. So I did that, and I have a funny picture of him jumping on me and just some stuff like that. And that's what got me into it. And I realized I really loved photography. I loved journalism, that kind of photography. And I thought, hey, I'll go to Afghanistan. This is a good time to do it, 2008. And my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, looked at me and was like, the hell you will. And so, because I would have thrown myself into the deep end, you know what I mean? And yeah, so I got forbidden from doing that, which led me to shooting for us and shooting the things that I shoot. I shot one wedding and refused to do that ever again.
Not a wedding fan.
Not photography wise, no.
Is it mainly because the bride and her family is so particular and just on you the whole time of what they want and just so hard to please, or what? Is it like Bridezilla or whatever they call it?
No, actually, they were really good about that. The part that actually got really frustrating was the random aunts and uncles. It was a Mexican wedding, and they came up and thought they got to tell me what to do. And they jumped in the way of, like, you know, after the wedding, you get those like husband wife pictures, those little bride and groom. They just jumped and they mauled it. And I am sort of OCD and A-type. And I knew I couldn't lose my mind at them. And I had that, like, you know, how college coaches yell at you. I wasn't allowed to say certain things. Oh, yeah. And having to restrain myself through that kind of frustration was just too much. And I was just like, get out of my pictures, please. Like, this isn't the 50 aunts and uncles picture. Just go away. And I was like, all right, I'll take my money. I gave them their pictures, and I was like, that never again. I'll just shoot for magazines, or I'll shoot for brands or something. So
I don't want to get real personal, but you talk about, you know, you take your money and you're out. Like, now you're in this position, you have a social following, I think like 290,000 followers on one of your pages. You have a social, what's that?
That's pretty close. Not quite that much, but yeah.
288. Am I close? What is it? What was it? Am I wrong? 248?
I don't know.
Well, let me look it up.
Probably.
I don't want to.
It doesn't offend me either way.
Okay.
It's not a big deal.
So you got to tell me straight up, Nate, how do you make a living in today's world? College educated, wife is college educated, 4 kids. It's not like you're just, you know, running away with your wife every weekend, and you got a lot of responsibility. You got a lot of mouths to feed. Where is the revenue come from in this type of lifestyle that you so proudly showcase through your social media platforms of being on the road and being in the backcountry? How does revenue come from this? Are you selling photography? I know you're an ambassador of different companies, like our presenting sponsor Tag today with Bedslide and Snug Top and Leer. Is that kind of where the revenue comes from, or do you have a full-time job still after you retire from the police department?
No, this is my full-time job right now. So you want the secret, huh?
Yeah, I want the secret.
How this is done.
I want the recipe.
Well, I mean, they have all these like how to do a blog things and stuff. So after leaving college, basically, I mean, I think the most important thing to understand is this doesn't just happen because you make a decision in your bedroom and you're like, screw it, I don't want to work for somebody, I'm going to start a blog. My wife always says, like, we didn't really see any serious money until she'd done it for 2 years, because she started it, and we started in 2009. And at that point, she had worked for that magazine I was shooting for. And then she moved up to a different company and learned how to do ad copy and things like that. And she became really big in the marketing area. And I'll name a couple brands just so you have context. So she worked for a company that wrote the ad copy and all the space for all the cruises, all the major cruises like Princess and Disney cruises and things like that. So anytime you got a travel brochure or magazine, she understood not only how to put those together, but what it is they were looking for and things like that. And that was great. And I was off trying to, be a cop. And after that, she became the head of marketing for an online sales company for, blinds and things like that. And on the side, she started a blog and she's like, yeah, I want to start writing. And so she does this. And eventually she leaves that company and she comes home one day and she says, I don't want to do this anymore. They're kind of crazy there. It was just one of those weird, like old person owns the company and says crazy things about how to run the internet. And, like pointing at the screen and said, make it go viral like all those other things. There's no viral button. Anyway, so she says, I want to do this. I want to write on my own. And at the time with her blogging, everybody's familiar with those female influencers who like just do all the stuff all over Instagram. Like, I love this lipstick and all that kind of stuff. And that was my impression of it at the time. This is when Instagram was really new. And I said, oh, okay, yeah, sure. If we can make enough money to buy groceries. I mean, I'm a deputy now. I have enough money to like pay our rent and things. So yeah, if that's what you really want to do. So I supported her. And she got really good at it. She used all her knowledge in marketing to set up her blog and set up a website that people would want to come to for, just tips, advice, and stuff like that about starting a family. Because someday I learned that was the point. And then she got so good, she ran campaigns. So somebody would reach out to her and be like, hey, we want to do this campaign about our widget. And, can you get together a bunch of your friends and stuff and run this social media campaign? So she did that. And eventually she started doing that for a brand called Wonderful. And you might be familiar with them. You ever see Wonderful Pistachios? Yeah. And then Fiji Water and Halos, the little oranges or cuties or whatever.
Oh, I like those.
Yeah, they own like 5 or something sub brands. And so she ran the campaigns for them. And they're based out of Los Angeles, really big company, gained a lot of experience dealing with hundreds and hundreds of other influencers and things. And she just understood the space and how to appropriately apply yourself into different areas. Me, on the other hand, I was a photographer, basically worthless. I just take good pictures. And when it comes to things like SEO, and I have no idea what she's talking about. But I was really, really good at telling a story visually. And so when she started running her blog more and leveraging her stories and things, I would help, with the photography and stuff like that. And eventually, brands catch on to this kind of thing and they reach out and like, hey, we want to send you, our whatever. How much would it cost for us to have you write about us on your blog? And you start sending out prices and things like that. And I think initially, being really inexperienced back in 2009 to 2011-ish, we'd say like, I don't know, $120. The 20 was the like negotiation point. And they'd say like 100 or something, we thought. And they'd buy, great, do our, STP fuel additive. That was one of the first ones I ever worked on with her. And that's kind of where it started. And eventually you do that enough and you start writing articles about things and you take pictures for them. And we were just doing this on our page. This isn't for them to use on their stuff. This isn't me doing like massive photo shoots or something. This is just writing our stories. And I remember a automotive suspension company reaching out and saying, hey, we want to work with you. There was the email. And my wife was like, I don't know what to say to them. I don't want to deal with this. And I said, just let me handle it. Can I do the negotiation? Because up to that point, I hadn't done it. And so she said, yeah. And I said, you don't care if you lose it. So it's not a big deal. And I'm sitting in my patrol car kind of around lunchtime, and I make the phone call we arrange, and I just negotiate a price that was at the time 5 times more than we had made on any blog post before. And I said, that's what's going to cost per thing. And they said, okay, well, we want 5 of them. We want you to tell 5 different aspects or how-to stories about how our suspension helps with certain aspects. And it was like an OEM suspension company. They just made aftermarket, replacement parts. And I was like, holy crap. I remember hanging up the phone, like, oh, cool, acting as cool as possible. Hung up the phone because I got to swing for the fences on this one. And I called her and I was like, ha 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 ha, was literally the first thing I said because I was like, you let me have it. And I knocked it out of the park. And she's like, holy crap, that's more than we make in like 3 months. And I was like, yeah, we're going to do this now. And so that's kind of how we got into it. From there, it's just mostly salesmanship. A lot of what you do is your ability to sell yourself and sell your craft or your product or whatever it is you're doing. And so we would go to conferences for things that are atypical, like parenting conferences. And then brands would be there to sponsor it, as they do sometimes, And I'll say, this is not an actual brand. I'm just going to use it as an example, but diaper brand A is there that, and I'm visually telling these stories out in the wild and outdoors in the mountains and things. And I'm like, hey, you can work with all these other people that are the same as everybody else. The little toddler crawling across the ground with their diaper on. That's their image of themselves. And I said, but you've never had one in the Sawtooth Mountain Range, have you? You've never had anybody take pictures of your product in the Rocky Mountains, with a little kid doing something next to a stream, obviously supervised, where, this is a completely different angle of the story and you're reaching a different audience in a completely different way. And that's where I figured out my skill and my craft, I guess. So that's how we leveraged our skills and our know-how and things like that to make this a full-time job. So, and then along the way, yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Along the way, what?
Oh, you find other things occasionally. You diversify yourself. You do wind up shooting product photography for some brands that need it and like your style and stuff. But that comes with like knowing people and experience. And that's why I say it's not something where you roll over in bed and like, I hate my job. I'm a blog now. Because if you do that, you're going to be bored real fast, and also losing your mind typing into a computer where nobody's really listening to you until you build an audience. So
you're sitting in a room right now with bookshelves behind you. Your social media made me feel like you don't have a house. Are you borrowing a friend's house and you put your UCLA football up there? Or are you not on the road full time living out of your camper shell and your fifth wheel? Or do you actually have a residence that you leave from there only certain times of the year or whatever?
That was a COVID issue, actually, to tell you the truth. I bought property. When we left California, we bought property on a lake out here that we planned on building a house on. And this is Idaho. I don't know how familiar you are with the climate up here. It's
I love it up there.
Not warm winters in an RV. And so when the construction industry went insane, I don't know where you are right now. What state are you in right now?
Nevada. We
Nevada.
fly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the construction industry went absolutely insane this last year. I'd say in the last 16 months or so. And prices of things just went, nobody knows what the hell's going on. And I wasn't about to start construction on this barn dominium that we planned on building, which is a giant steel building.
With the living quarters in it, yeah.
Yeah. And so, we had these plans for 20-foot ceilings, yada, yada, yada. And it just didn't make sense. So we were living in an RV full time until, I want to say, the beginning of the COVID stuff, which was March of 2020. And my wife is actually pretty smart. So we found a house before the market super, super tore up here. And we bought the house as an emergency because our priority is making sure our kids are safe. And that's what we're in. It's actually not a very big house. It's built in the 1963. We remodel it, fix it up and stuff. So no, I have a house. I'm not completely nomadic, but yeah, we travel so much. Sometimes we're here less than we are out on the road, if that makes sense. Like right now, we're already planning for, we just realized my passport's expired. So we're trying to have that rush fixed. So next week we can leave the country. So we travel a lot. That's basically what we do all the time.
You're going north next week to Canada, or are you flying somewhere?
We're going south. We're going south to the land of spicy foods. So
Mexico.
Yeah, I've actually never been there before. And I'll tell you, being a cop in San Diego County, right across from Tijuana, you get even more afraid to travel across the border because we get like reports of like the murder rate, and we're like, 26 people were killed last night. And we're like, I'm never taking my family there.
So why are you?
It's just, we're not going there. We're going way, way further south, and they are flying us. So I get to skip over the top. Plus I'm trying to expand my mind. My wife, her grandfather was well off. He actually was the vice president of a company called Getty Oil. If you're familiar with them, they became Texaco and Chevron. And he owned a bunch of properties down there, I guess. I don't know how that works because it's another country, but she spent a lot of her time as a kid down there, flying into those resorts and stuff. And she's always wanted to go back. I've always been afraid. And this opportunity, based on the way it's set up, is something that I can swallow, and it satisfies her desire to take me there for the first time. So I said, okay, yeah, sure, I'll go. So
are you going down there to live the nomadic lifestyle? You're going to go catch a fish and cook it wherever you're staying? Or are you staying at an all-inclusive 5-star American-owned resort? Or are you staying at one of her family properties? Are you going to be doing content from down there and kind of letting your fans and followers live through the experience?
Yeah, it'll be a little bit of the whole 5-star resort thing, and then creating content on our own down there for what we do, traveling around the area. It will not be a nomadic thing. I'm definitely not going to do that in a place that I'm not comfortable crossing the border in, because I'll screw myself over. So I was like, oh, I'm not supposed to be here. Sorry. And then I'll wind up with a whole bunch of federales putting me in a jail cell and charging me extra unknown fees for food or something. So
where do your kids develop their social skills in a lifestyle like, like school has a lot more to offer than just being book smart, right? You got your recess, you got your competition, are they competitive? Are they in organized sports? I have to ask you this because you're taking them to Mexico now. Are they always together, just the four of them? Do they have friends outside of it, maybe in your general area of where you live? Do they have cousins that they run with? Because a big thing going on in our world right now, Nate Day, is that, there's parents that aren't going to let their kids go to school because of the mask mandate and because of everything that's going on in the public school systems. And we're victim of it here right now. My 10-year-old, I can't stand that she has to wear a mask in the classroom, but at least I'm glad she's in school. I'm glad that her teacher is taking in and putting the time in to get her an education, because I would love to say I could homeschool, but I can't. ADD, my brands, my I have a job. A lot of parents have full-time jobs. Homeschool teaching is a full-time job, and I'm not trying to get around my original question. One, Are you guys homeschooling like 4 or 5, 6 hours a day when you go to Mexico, or is it like a vacation lifestyle for these kids? And I want to go back to my first question, Nate Day, is the social skills of a kid is very important at a young age, and your kids all look like they're 12 and younger, probably. Tell me 10 and younger. Tell me about that part of your life, and are you worried at all that they're not getting? I understand they're learning the land. I love that ability to fish and to understand nature and to be one with it and mountain climb and understand wildlife, whatever it is. But are they getting that socialism that they need, that socializing that they need?
They're not getting socialism.
Yeah, no, that was a dumb word to use. Scratch that word.
No, it's fine. I know, I completely understand, and that's definitely a concern you have when you decide to homeschool your kids. We don't set a block of time for them to homeschool. I think if you're in a lot of states, they say they have to have, X number of hours a day. My wife, just to give you a tiny bit of backstory, she was born in a commune in California, and the government didn't know she existed until she was 3 years old, where she got a delayed registration of birth because she literally lived in a commune, no idea what was going on. And so her dad has that lifestyle kind of sort of still. He lives in the Bay Area in San Diego, or not San Diego, but San Francisco area. And that was kind of where she comes from, a really weird kind of scenario. On the other hand, I grew up all over the country. And I remember as a kid, I lived in Oklahoma, and living out there on a 13-acre, property and small farm, you don't see anybody. My nearest neighbor was a rifle shot away. You'd be lucky if you hit their house. And so I was always just with my brother, and that's my perspective on things. And she's kind of liberal. But I say liberal as in just like socially. So when it came to school in California, she really, really hated how controlled things were. She wanted to be able to move freely. If we wanted to go somewhere, she didn't want to have to ask for permission to have her own kids with her. And so that was the primary drive. So when we're on the road, another part of what we considered, at least initially, was what was our requirement? Who are we reporting to prove that our kids aren't, being turned into idiots or allowed to be growing up as dummies? And she figured that, we chose Idaho. They don't mandate a certain amount of hours or things like that. Okay, good. So we got that taken care of. They do what they have to do as long as they meet certain criteria as far as knowledge levels. And that mostly has to do with math and reading, right? So if your kid can read, great. They understand words, great. And if they understand math progressively throughout their time through the year, then good. If they can accomplish certain problems, great. Because my wife doesn't think you should just force a kid based on their age to understand something like, oh, you better understand this or you're falling behind. And, she understands. She was also a teacher after we left school for a short period of time. So she understands everybody has their own needs and education and things like that. So she's compassionate as far as, what they need to know. Now, as far as social skills, not socialism skills, that really falls to me as far as how I integrate them into society and things like that. And I have a really good anecdote for you as an example. It's not just about other kids. I mean, they have plenty of brothers. We have a church we go to, and they get to interact with kids there and practice their skills and things like that. Because, social skills is a practice. It's something you can learn. A lot like, sports or athletics. There's perishable skills. You can get good at social skills and you become a hermit and then you'll get bad at them again. You know what I mean? And so they're out there, they get to practice what I teach them and things like that. But as far as an anecdote is concerned, we're walking through a grocery store, right? And I have 4 kids. I'm a dad. I'm 6'4", 320 pounds. I'm a former offensive and defensive tackle, right? And I'm a very big person pushing a shopping cart. My kids are not wild. I mean, they're sometimes rowdy and loud with each other, but they're not running around all over. And we're standing in the aisle. They're only 6-8 feet wide or something like that. And this person's coming towards us. And instead of talking to my kids to get by, because clearly this is what this woman wants, she looks at me. And at this point, I think my oldest is 8, which means my youngest is 2. So he's in the basket. And I look at her and I don't know if it's my nature. It mostly is my nature, I guess. But as a cop, confrontation is something I'm completely fine with. And I look at her and she looks at me and she looks at the kids as if I'm supposed to do something for her. And I know what she wants. She wants me to get the kids out of her way. They're looking at cereal or chili cans or something like that. It doesn't matter. And that's when I say they speak English, basically inferring you can talk to my kids like you would talk to any other human being. You don't have to have me herd them for you. They are people too. If you want to get by, you can say, excuse me. And that is something that I told her. And she said, oh, kind of off put. And then she says, excuse me to the kids. And they right away immediately move over to my side of the aisle. And she moves about her way. And I talk to them and I bring this up because that's exactly what I tell them is if you wanted to be, you're out here in the world, I expect you to be equally a person as anybody else is a person. If you want to talk to somebody, you look at them and say, excuse me, and then you can talk to them. I give them opportunities at fast food stores to go up to the counter and ask for refills or something. And they go up and people ignore them because they're kids. And that's my opportunity to teach my kids to speak up. If you want to be heard, you look at them in the eye and you say, excuse me, confidently. You bring it from yourself because you have every right to be there, that any other customer has at being there. Just because some 6 foot tall, skinny teenage boy who walks up behind you doesn't give him more of an opportunity to go over the top of you in a line. You know what I mean? And so that is my way of teaching them self-respect, the ways to interact with the community and things like that. Their autonomy, they're allowed to be there. They're allowed to have their own space and not get pushed out of the way. If something happens, they know, and through experience, I will step in and say, move. I mean, we've had that. If you ever watch, I don't expect you to right now, but in the past, in some of my stories, I've had them hold a spot with a shopping cart in a line. Now everybody has to be 6 feet apart, right? And a lot of these stores put dots on the ground, like you can be here, you could be here. I had a lady, when they were by themselves, I went to go get a loaf of bread or something off a nearby aisle. And there was already somebody getting checked out in front of them. So there's a process here. And this lady walks up and she sees them. And I express this in my stories. I'll film the scenario and the situation and I'll show it basically 10 seconds afterwards. She walks up and goes right in front of them because they're just a bunch of kids, right? And they know that their father, if they see this, will handle that. That's not for them to be like, oh, hey, what you doing here? I walked up and said, no, they were in line first. That's their spot. You don't cut them because they're kids. They are people. That's their spot. And so they know that their family is here to back them. They understand that their family is important. That's where everything and their values are and their loyalty is. But they also understand that if they go out by themselves, to take care of themselves, to speak up, to have self-respect, you don't have to bow down to other people just because they're taller than you, bigger than you, or, seem like their issues are more urgent than yours, and that's where it starts. From there, you just play with other kids when the time comes and you treat yourself with respect, you treat others with respect. I don't see a problem with that. I mean, as things come up, every parent has to deal with things as they come up. And when they come up, I deal with them. You know what I mean?
100%. So you don't just get a college scholarship to play offensive or defensive line at UCLA. Your Pac-10 D1 school. This is serious football. A lot of NFL players have been drafted out of this conference, this school. But you didn't just do that. I'm sure, or I assume that you had a history of organized sports. Does this lifestyle, is it conducive to this? Do your kids get to sign up for Little League or gymnastics class or football or basketball? Is there any vision of that? Because again, organized sports and getting coached, discipline, being coachable, being teachable in life are very strong assets, in my opinion. I think that sports is a very good way to garner this done right. Okay, there's a lot of things that can go wrong with youth sports too, especially when you have those parents that think that their kid's the end all. I see a lot of problems watching my daughter or my nephews play sports, but I'm assuming that they don't have time if they're always on the road with you guys. Is that fair to say, or am I wrong on that? And they do participate in organized sports, Nate?
No, that you are correct in the fact that we haven't had time up until now. This year is the first year with my oldest being 10. I've decided we're actually going to start sports, especially with this house here in the city. And there's one sport that I believe, and it's the same sport I started in kindergarten. I was 6 years old. That is, I think, in our family's opinion, and I mean from my dad down, is the critical sport to start with, and that's wrestling.
I love wrestling. Great sport.
Yeah, that was my religion as a kid, I guess, outside of my religion. And I mean, we'd always say that's the first sport, wrestling. Other than whatever
320-pound lineman that can wrestle. I mean, now we're talking like Gable Stevenson numbers right now.
Yeah. Well, I went to state 3 times, and that was fun. I wasn't 320 pounds. I was 240 pounds when I went. So I was actually a really, really light heavyweight. And if you know much about wrestling, I wasn't a tie-up guy. I was a shooter, which really, really helped me out. So by the time of my senior year, I went to state 35-0. I think for California, and that was 2 times. I showed up with 0 losses and stuff like that. But yeah, no, wrestling is going to be the sport that we start. Being coachable, I think, just comes down to parenting. You can have a kid that, some of them, my dad didn't have parents. I would say he was partially coachable. He just ran on pure intensity. That's why he wound up having a full ride scholarship, and he played for San Diego State. But he was like an 80s football player, the kind missing teeth.
Yeah.
And just pure rage. And, I think with a good understanding and head on your shoulders, you're coachable. Growing up wrestling, my dad was my coach because wrestling didn't stop when practice was over. It came to my living room. It was always there. No matter where you were, you can always do something. Hell, you could be behind a building and work on certain techniques and things. And my dad lived and breathed sports. So, it was never hard or, there wasn't any challenges into constantly keeping that part of your life. So yeah, that's what we're going to do this year. We're going to do wrestling, and hopefully they like it. If they don't, well, tough. They're going to work on it, and they're going to at least give me 3 years out of it until I decide they really, really don't like it, if that's the case. But I highly doubt that's going to be the case with all 3 of them, or all 4 of them, because they're just monsters.
I love it, and I love wrestling, and I couldn't agree more. Staying on I'm just very inquisitive and interested in the dynamics. I think this is a lifestyle that's not lived by a lot. I mean, there's some out there, don't get me wrong, but what you portray out there of this adventure lifestyle, you're always with this group of 6 people. Do you feel as a man, a married man, does it allow time for just you and your wife to get away? Because I assume you don't have a lot of babysitters that are on the string on the road with you. You probably don't have a full-time nanny to where, hey, watch the 4 kids. We're going to go on a hike up to this lake and have a romantic picnic. Does the romance stay in a marriage like this? I know that there's love and I know there's admiration, but when you're always with that same group of people, is there downtime for you and the lady friend here, being so I guess, for lack of better terms, just locked in this environment of the family? And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it, Nate, so please don't take that wrong. Family's the most important thing in the world. I know you love all of your kids, but I also know that you're a man and you're probably like, I got to get away from these little monsters once in a while. Does this lifestyle allow for this? And do you wish you had more of that? Or is it just kind of like it just falls into place and you take what as it comes? I
would say yes and no. No, it does not fall into place. It's not just one of those things you hope, we'll just wind up. No, that's not how it works. It's definitely something you hope for. And it's definitely something that's a problem. I don't want to say problem. It's definitely a challenge. You know what I mean? But I think most of it isn't so much related to our traveling necessarily as it is the age of the kids. I don't know how many people, what percentage of your followers and listeners are parents. Probably a fair number if they're outdoorsman type guys. But when they're real little, my God, you can't, they're not autonomous. They're just like dogs, that just puppies. Like imagine like having a bird dog, you're hoping to train into a good bird dog, but they just won't leave you alone. And you got to teach them to stay on their box or however your training technique is. But you're just like, geez, Louise, just, oh my God, there's no time alone. Now that we have a 10-year-old, we've recently started feeling comfortable, say, for example, just running to the store, and leaving them here,
right,
without thinking the house is going to burn down. And the 8-year-old has, he's been diagnosed basically as having Asperger's. And we realize I have some tendencies as well in that area. So he's extremely logical and responsible, if that makes sense. So he's equivalent to his 10-year-old as far as awareness and intelligence. I'm not going to get too much into that. But so then it leaves my 6 and 4-year-old who are worthless as far as taking care of themselves, unless, finding candy and eating it when you're not supposed to is a skill. So
next week it is.
Yeah.
Do they get to go trick-or-treating next week?
Yeah, we're going to see if we could find a neighborhood we want to walk around in and then do the whole whatever. But no, it really comes down to planning and forethought. You're going to be in a certain area, so you call your parents or you find a way to distract them. Also, making the most of small moments is a big deal when it comes to, being alone with my wife or whatever. If we know we're going to go to, we have errands to run, we make the most of that errand as we can together if we're going by ourselves, since we can leave them home, but now my parents have moved up here. So I'm like, great, you get them for 3 days. Goodbye. They're happy to have them and I'm happy to be rid of them. But I, obviously love them and stuff, but it's just a challenge. And as they get older, it becomes easier, and so that's where we're at right now. I haven't solved the problem, but at least it's.
So does it take its toll? Does it take its toll on the relationship of this lifestyle of always being together? Yeah. Is it all about transparency and communication and setting forth what the expectations of the marriage are? Because that's one of the biggest things in marriage, is that a lot of times we would lose our individuality because we start living for our kids, and the conglomerate of what's there, of the consistency of that marriage and that relationship is now 6 people instead of 2 when you were courting this woman back when you guys were coming out of college and she was a teacher and you were a deputy sheriff. But now it's like, bam, I don't even know if I can kiss my wife a lot of the times because, we don't have time for it. So like, there's got to be a lot of effort put into making sure that stabilizes and continues to prosper. I mean, is that fair to say? That's got to be an important key to your life, is that you guys stay happy together.
No, absolutely. And by no means am I an expert at this. This is not something where I'm
not saying you are. I'm just trying to learn myself of how you do it.
No, it's definitely a struggle, but I'd say 2 of the things that you said are pretty key, is like communication and understanding where each other are at. I guess basically is, this is our situation. We both understand we have a job to do, because having kids is a commitment. And if you don't think that way, you're stupid. Now you can disagree with that if you want to, but your first priority should be each other. But that's one of the misnomers, is that you say, I think in good relationships and families, they're like, hey, if you have kids, you need to understand mom and dad or husband and wife, they need to be the first priority, and then very quickly followed by the kids. That doesn't mean husband and wife need to have all the time. You know what I mean? You just need to understand you're on the same side, you're on the same team, you have the same goals, but you also need to communicate and understand what each other needs at different times. And they're not always the same thing. And that's okay. That's part of growing up and maturing, I think. And you take care of your kids, you do your responsibilities, and then you use the time you have afterwards as you see fit. So I think communication is a really, really important part. So,
but it does have I want to make sure that everybody understands that it's work, it's effort, right? You got to make effort into anything in life, right? And you can't just wake up and be like, oh yeah, we're a happy couple with 4 kids. There's a lot of effort and passion that goes into this. And you can't just go through the motions. You have to be a husband, a dad, a lover. You have to be a supporter, a provider. It's not like just because you're married with 4 kids and everybody sees you're out there in the wild with your family. This is a lot of effort to keep this going, because it could run out of steam if not done the right way. This is me talking. I'm assuming that you're just like, man, I got to put in a lot of effort into this. I got to make sure my wife knows that we are still individuals. We were put on this earth to achieve goals with each other individually. And I think a lot of times in life, Nate Day, that whether it's a girlfriend and you quit hanging out with your buddies, or she quits hanging out with her friends, and then it's a marriage, and then it's, okay, well, we're married now. We're different. I don't go out with my buddies anymore. She doesn't go out with her girlfriends as much. There might be a couple trips a year. And then it's kids. And now it's Everything is about the kids. My dad was like this before he passed away. Everything was about us. It was all the kids, almost to the point to where I don't know if my dad was really doing everything that he was put on earth to do. You kind of lose yourself, if that makes sense. And I think that people have this misnomer, Nate Day, that, oh, I'm 40 years old or I'm 35 years old and I have these kids. Well, you're still out there. You were put on this earth for a reason too. You still have individual goals, right? So there's all of these different pieces that make this a complexity, in my opinion. You have your personal goals, your individual goals, you have your goals with your wife. Now you have your kids. You want to see them flourish. There's a lot of work that goes into this lifestyle of being family oriented 24/7. And at least that's what it looks like that you're portraying online to me, is that you guys are together a lot more than you're not.
Yeah. Well, two things about what you said. And, you have the dad role, the husband role, the lover role, yourself as an individual. And I think as you progress through life, one of the things my uncle told me when I was young is you should never stop learning. You should always have a hunger to learn new things. And I think that transfers over into personal life. You may have the role of being a dad, an individual, a husband, a lover, all that kind of stuff. But if you think that just having that role makes you set in that position, you're wrong. I think, if you have the dad role, as a dad myself, there are a lot of things I'm learning. One, I'm trying to fix things that my dad did that I teach or I pass on. I'm trying to improve on certain things, eliminate certain things that were, I could look at now as an older person and maybe a new generation and say, like, that needs to be fixed. Just because I'm a dad doesn't make that role, accomplished. It's not an accomplishment. It's a task. It's an ongoing task, like a farmer going out to sow his field. You can have a field, you can till it, you can set it up and get all your nutrients put into it and then get ready to seed it. And then you're not done. You have more work to do. There's seasons in everything that you do. And in those seasons, you have things and responsibilities and things to improve on. And so I think the same is true of being a husband, and everything isn't just going to be like, oh, I'm a husband, there I am. It's that stagnance that kills you. It's that stagnance, that lack of learning, that lack of progressing and knowing that, oh yeah, I'm a husband. That doesn't mean I'm good at this. That means I have different responsibilities now and different things I can get better at. You know what I mean? So that's the first thing that, as you said, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's different roles. That doesn't mean you have a role. It's like getting a job and like, I made it. I am the, executive assistant. If that's the end of your career, that's the way you're going to think about it. That's what you do until you die. And if that's the way you think about your life, you're doing something wrong. You know what I mean? I'm a dad. I started out as a dad. I didn't think, 10, 11 years ago, I know what I'm going to do with this kid. Disneyland once a year, haunted mansions in the Halloween. That's not my life. That's not how I do things. It's a progression. And that's part of, I could say I'm nomadic. I have a house. Yeah. But the things I do evolve. I teach my kids on the road because everything I do is new and exciting. That's why I evolved them into hunting. My oldest son got to hunt for the first time last year, and that was a new experience, a new lifestyle and all that stuff. And I'm evolving that as a husband. I'm learning to deal with hunting season and my wife, that's something I have to figure out. Like, how do I earn that time? Because if I think I'm entitled to it, I'm a dipshit. If I think I get to show up and it's October 1st and like, no, great, bow season's open, then I'm an a-hole, because I'm not doing what I'm responsible for doing. I have the role. I'm a husband, whatever, but I have responsibilities and I have considerations, and that's about empathy and compassion. And, to add to what you're saying, it's not, I want to always make sure that everybody understands it's not, and you should never have ultimatums. Like you said, I'm not hanging out with my friends anymore, whatever. If that's an issue, that's a problem, but it's all about understanding I have responsibilities, but I also have a gift in these responsibilities and I can make the most of it. And I can also make sure that when I budget my time and my efforts and things like that, that I have something that I am satisfied with. And you should, just like a career, because that's what this is.
100%. Is it to where you and your wife, excuse me for asking, but what's your wife's name? I don't want to
Chelsea.
Okay, no, you and Chelsea. I didn't want to look it up just now. Is it a lot of communication of what your guys' expectations are, or did you guys sit down and you just made a comment like it's kind of like you're always learning, you're always adapting, you're always transitioning, you're always trying to become a better version of yourself every day as an individual, as a parent, as a coach, as a leader, as a mentor. Mentorship is huge in hunting, like you mentioned, right? Your kids are lucky they have you to mentor them into that. I've seen pictures of you with a bow and in your camouflage. You love being out there, one with nature, honing your skill set. are you and your wife on the same page always when it comes to parenting skills? Like you're like, hey, I'm going to get them into bow hunting. And she's like, no, I grew up in a commune and we're not going to do that. They're not going to hunt. I mean, is there a lot of friction that comes with this, or are you guys always communicating on the parenting skills and she understands where you're coming from at all times?
No, definitely not. If I said I made a lie, if I was like, yeah, we talk about it on Tuesdays, no, not at all. I would say the start of everything that helped us was when we dated. And oddly enough, I don't know how you are on your faith or religion or anything like that. I believe in God. I believe in Jesus and all that stuff. And
so do I. I'm very spiritual.
Well, I knew right away that was a criteria that I had to have. I thought when I first saw her, she was absolutely beautiful. I don't think your followers could I don't know if they see this or just listen to it, but I'd show you a picture. My wife, damn, I got lucky. And
you outkicked your punt coverage per se as a football player.
I hit the back of the bleachers. So when we started dating, I guess it's my Asperger's type, side of me or something like that my son clearly has. I was like, listen, we need to know. And she was like, the same exact thing. We laid it out. We're like, I believe in this. And she's like, cool, me too. And she's like, I want this. And I was like, cool, me too. And outside of that, we'll work out everything else. We know we wanted a family. We knew we had loyalty and we knew we had the same faith. We knew we had the same goals. Everything else in between, that's the destination. Like we want this, like we have this thread, this line, this where we want to walk this path, and we're going to see a lot of cool things along the way. As far as hunting and stuff, no, she has no problem with that. I mean, she eats meat. Actually, she was a vegetarian when I met her. I changed that with In-N-Out. I actually her first.
Just made me hungry.
Yeah, well, actually, I don't want to talk politics, but In-N-Out, they're having a good time in California right now.
You saw that San Francisco story, huh?
Yeah,
See ya.
I applaud them for having balls, but
see ya. They don't. Yeah, I loved it too.
But no, we understand that, and then she understands that I'm not just trying to be some wackadoo going hunting. One of the guy that got me into hunting, and I think most people know him, is Steve Ranella. But it wasn't when his Meat Eater show or anything like that. It was before that when I was in college. And when I was a kid, I grew up. My dad, not having parents, thought Bambi was what hunting was. You know what I mean? He had no parents. He was just like, I don't understand hunting. I don't know how you go out and just shoot an animal. I can go to the store and buy food. I don't need to do that. And it wasn't anything necessarily against hunting. It's just that was his understanding. And that's what I had. I don't come from a family of hunters. All the pictures of me and my camera was taken by my 8-year-old with a cell phone. I'm like, cool, thanks, bud. And, I don't have a lot of setup for that. And so I had to teach myself, but my changing moment, I think I was a sophomore or junior in college, and Steve Ranella had some random thing. I don't even know what it was called. It was like The Wild Within or something. And there was a scene where he was in Hawaii knife hunting pigs. And there was one thing he said that stuck with me. And it was, everybody wants bacon, but nobody wants to stab the pig. And to me, it was about accountability. Hunting isn't just about like, oh, the outdoors great. No, it was about, I eat meat. I'm not going to stop eating meat. But if I'm not the one at some point in time, at least once, that is willing to hold the full weight of my diet, of my life in my hands, then I really don't deserve it. You know what I mean? If I'm capable of doing this, being accountable for what I own, what I take part in and all that stuff, then I have no leg to stand on when it comes to discussing it. You know what I mean? And that's when I set out learning more about hunting and the whole philosophies and things like that. And so he gets credit for changing my whole outlook on that. I remember in college kind of looking into things, and it's kind of hard to learn how to hunt in Los Angeles. So it was mostly research at the time, just kind of like, oh God, this is kind of cool, and understanding what it's about and being able to bring that to anything we deal with. Between Chelsea and I is really all that matters. If she understands where I'm coming from, like, hey, this is it. This is why I want to do this. And this is what it's all about for me. Then she has no problem with it. If it's me going like, hey, I want to get a new truck because, everybody does this truck thing. She'd be like, well, you have budgets to think about. You have children to think about. And then if she beats me down with logic, then I go, yeah, you're right. And so, no, I have no problems with anything that I can logically approach. And that's, I think, what makes this work so well. Because if we can just logically approach it and present our ideas, and again, that's why communication is so important. It's not just saying what you want, it's being able to back it up and present your evidence. Because sometimes discussions you have with your wife are kind of like going to court. Your Honor, if the court pleases, I'd like to present this.
Sidebar.
Yeah,
No, it's very well stated, and I love Rennell. I love Meat Eater. I think that he's responsible for a lot of people understanding the bacon comment and knowing. I mentioned it in the beginning of our conversation, Nate, of knowing where your food comes from and the responsibility and accountability that goes into being a responsible gatherer. And it's funny that people will get in line at what you called the In-N-Out. I drove by an In-N-Out last night coming back from a dinner with a partner of mine in the Western lifestyle world. I met with him for 3 hours last night, and all we talked about was the Western lifestyle, like, and living off the land and how important it is. And then I drive home, and I looked at least 60 cars coming from all different directions because this In-N-Out is crazy busy. I don't know how they do it, but it's from opening to close. There's at least 30 cars in the drive-in. But last night, it was unreal. And I'm like, a lot of those people in that line are okay with eating that double-double, animal style, ketchup only, crispy fries, but they don't understand
Both types of onions.
They don't understand what those cattle and those steers went through of being slaughtered. They're okay with that. I'll eat it. But then when it comes to going to the ballot box and voting on something that has to do with hunting or our right to hunt, it's not just a privilege. I've been educated in many talks with Mr. Ted Nugent about it's our right to defend our families and to put food on the table through hunting. Okay, especially if it's said in the Bible in a lot of people's opinion, but why is it okay for us to eat an In-N-Out burger, but it's not okay for us to go out and stab a pig or arrow an elk or catch a fish and put it on our Traeger grill? I don't understand the analogy, but when they go to vote, they'll just vote with their emotion of like, whoa, like your dad, that's Bambi. We can't kill that deer. We can't kill that bear in California. We can't kill that mountain lion in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is overran with cougars and coyotes. It's the number one population of coyotes in the country. People don't understand that because they think Disneyland, they think the movie industry, they think Sunset Boulevard and Beverly Hills and Rodeo Drive and Santa Monica Boulevard. That's what they think of LA and the beaches and all that. Well, let me tell you something. There's a lot of hunting that goes on in the state of California. There is a ton of hunting in the state of California. But what can't you hunt? You can't kill a cougar. You can't tree bears. Now they're trying to outlaw bear hunting as a whole because they're voting with emotion and not based on scientific data. So anyway, I'm off on a little soapbox right now, but
no. Actually, I kind of like what you're talking about because actually they knocked down the bear hunting thing. That was a thing.
They did knock it down, but it'll be brought back. It'll be brought back,
and that's fine. They tried to knock down guns, and they got their ass kicked on that one this last year, which I applauded. Even as a cop, like I'd show up with things, and I mean, as long as it wasn't a gangbanger that was doing something wrong, and they legally owned what they owned. I had a guy from Montana have his house burglarized. He just moved to California, and I was taking the burglary report.
Well, that's kind of ass backwards, ain't it?
Well, he had work to do. He was a contractor of some sort. I don't want to get too specific. And so he pointed to his closet, and he said, my 22 and my 20 gauge got stolen. And he moves the coats that he had. He had a duster in there, actually. It was kind of funny because, resistol dusters.
Yeah.
That was so he had one of those. It blocked his AR-15 on the other side that the Dingle Dick didn't steal. And he goes, yeah, but they didn't get this one. And I looked at it and I knew for the year that I was there, it was illegal per California standards. I mean, just importing it into the state would have been a crime. I always had like partners, and because I was a training officer, so I taught people things and I taught them how to do their job. And I stood back about 10 feet and I said, well, I'm not going to look too closely at that because I'm not examining you for any crimes right now. I really don't give a flying whatever. But if it has this sort of magazine and it doesn't have a button for the magazine release, which is whatever, I'm just going to say I wouldn't take it out in public. I'd keep it locked up. And if you get caught by any other type of cop who really wants to look at it because he thinks he's solving a problem, you might have a problem. And his wife slapped him on the shoulder. It's like, I told you not to bring that here. I said, no, listen, I don't care. It's not here. I don't care. It looks legal to me from 10 feet away. And that's as far as I'm going to get to it. Now, as far as what you're talking about with hunting, it's actually kind of funny. You talk about coyotes in California. Homeschool wise, we travel a lot. So we see a lot of animal preserves and not rescue shelters. When like a bird gets hit and they take the hawk into a shelter to get rehabilitation centers. And we went to one out in South Dakota, and they rehabbed a whole bunch of random things like ravens and, coyotes and wolves and things like that. I think this was Montana actually. And I learned something interesting about coyotes, and they're extremely hardy animals, the way they work. And the more you kill them, the more they grow into a certain area because of population decline. They actually move into those areas. And so people are bewildered in California why they're moving into cities. They're just like raccoons, kind of, they do well everywhere they go.
Most adaptable animal on the planet.
Yeah, one of them, other than cockroaches, I think.
Yeah.
And
Keith Richards.
but, no, there was something else you said. I kind of forgot here, but yeah, no, I just think it's interesting, all these things. And
well, we're just voting with our emotions.
The beef thing, and that was what I want to talk to you about. You look at these people in In-N-Out and they're okay, and they go to the ballot box. It really comes from the same place. And I empathize and I understand. I think the most important thing to do is understand as a hunter. A lot of times, especially nowadays, people look at somebody else and they have an opposing view. I don't want to understand why. I just don't like them because of that view. And I have the benefit of being who I am and knowing what I know and believing what I believe. But at the same time, I guess I went to a liberal school because I didn't get the same thing out of it. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention. But empathizing with somebody doesn't mean agreeing with them. It just means understanding where they're coming from. So you have these people, and it came up. They go to In-N-Out, they eat these things, but then they think hunting's bad, right? Because they think hunting is taking care of a free wild animal. Well, ironically, these things you talk about having rights and wanting to be able to go out and live off the land. I'm an Indian. I'm not a funny, haha Indian like what's her name? I'm actually in, a registry. My tribe flies my family to Oklahoma to go to the Indian meetups. I have an Indian identification card. I actually I had to show a bank yesterday, and this is as close as I'll get. But
what tribe?
That's my Indian. I'm a Chickasaw Indian.
Nice.
All my kids are Indians. I'm in the Bureau of Indians. I'm registered with everybody. The Bureau of Indians, the federal organization, the whole thing. And so I actually had a discussion with somebody else the other day. Like, I have to pay to go to national parks, right? But if you have ADD or ADHD, which is considered a disability, your park passes are free for life. I'm paying to go, but you have ADD, so you get to go for free. That bothers me. That's a small side note. But you have these people and they don't understand what it is. And I think, for example, when I hunt deer I shot last year, a mule deer, and it just kind of hit me. Like, it had no idea I was there. It was living its life just fine. And people are like, oh, why didn't you just let it live its life? Well, you got cows you're eating all the time that are living in pens or living in small farms or even large farms, but they're going into these places that are confined. That's all they know. The food that I eat or go after when I do this is living a complete life, and then it's gone. Like, it is what it is. It's done. It's actually the most peaceful, you'd have to think about it, peaceful way to go, because you don't know it's coming. You know what I mean?
They live their greatest life. They live a blessed life.
So I look at my dad and the thing you said about people that don't understand, they vote the way they vote. As a hunter, if you come across these people, you have to be empathetic first, because if you're adversarial first, you're not going to get anywhere. Nobody's going to get beaten into a different opinion. You know what I mean? But you can just go like, listen, I understand you've never been exposed to what really is going on. Unless they're vegan. No, I'll never agree with a vegan.
Vegans kill more animals than hunters do daily.
I don't even want to talk about it. It's just, I don't even want to talk.
I like to talk about it sometimes because I find it amusing.
I don't. It's just, that's a waste of time. It's not a valid thing. It's just like, I think we agree too much to even talk about it. But no, you look at these people and they think, people that eat meat necessarily, and then they just don't understand hunting. And you go, listen, I understand how you feel, but no matter what, a wolf was going to get it. It was going to die between two trees it got stuck in, fall off a mountain, or rarely do they ever make it to old age. There's no old age in the wild. You know what I mean? So you have this 2-year-old, 3-year-old deer. It's got to meet a bunch of does over the period of its life. It's done its job. It's done what it's wanted to do. It's lived a natural life to this point. And here I am, 120 yards out, 308 in my hand. It can't smell me, see me, feel me, or even think about me right now. It's just thinking like I'm taking a nap, or I'm going to eat this like shrub underneath this oak tree. And 2 seconds later, it's laying on the ground, maybe slightly confused, at worst, similar to like being bumped by somebody in a shopping center. And then its lights go out. You know what I mean? It's dead. It's going wherever it goes when it dies. And that's it. It hasn't been dragged through a process. It hasn't been standing around watching all this. I don't mean to anthropomorphize this, but watching all its friends be taken into the slaughter room. You know what I mean? It's not at Auschwitz, and it died in its free reign. It ironically died free. So what's your problem here?
Well, the question that I always ask myself is like, what do you think is going to happen if you don't control the populations, if you don't look at the science of what disease can do through a population if they're not controlled? Well, this goes for predator management, wildlife populations, and then you look at the whole conservation. initiatives throughout the last, let's just say century. Let's say since 1908, when the first wildlife refuge at Klamath Falls, Oregon, California border was put into effect. What do you think hunters are doing for the wildlife? What are the antis doing? What is PETA doing to secure the future of these habitats and these populations of wild animals? And if you look at the management process of what it's done to the overall abundance of white-tailed deer and Rocky Mountain elk and wild turkeys and the ducks and the flyways and the geese and the flyways and the fish in the streams, it's a no-brainer. But people want to sit there and say, well, if you don't kill them, they're going to thrive. It's the exact opposite. It's some coming out of the ecosystem. It's an education process that deer, that elk, that duck is living its life to the fullest. And if you do it irresponsibly, Nate, and you don't eat what you kill and you're just going out there poaching or commercial hunting still, then we have issues with that. We have to be good stewards of the land. We have to be good ambassadors to this lifestyle. I know you're trying to say something. I'll end it by this. I have a big problem with people having the mindset, and I'm not going to judge them for it. I just want them to be educated about what management means and that there is a responsible way of doing this. And that's what I think hunters need to keep in mind, is that we need to educate. We don't want to jump on a soapbox and just be like, you're an idiot because you're a vegan or that you're an anti-hunter. That's not it. Just educate them through example and be a good steward of that land and just show them, hey, here's why I do it. And here's some reasons, and here's where this food went to. Whether it's a homeless shelter, a food bank, or your family, here's why I do it.
Well, I think other than the vegan conversation, which again, I would avoid like the plague, because that's like talking up a cliff.
Big time.
I really think it has to do with understanding how to converse with people. And again, I can go back to empathy, but I think if you approach it with a building blocks mentality, like start with a basic good foundation of understanding what most people's problem is. It isn't, if you start with, and I understand your point, and I actually agree with that as a scientific and statistical point. It's very valid. It's very true. The herd management and conservation efforts and things like that, and what it does to populations and how it helps them avoid disease and things like that. And this is a matter of opinion. So your opinion and experience is different than mine. If I start with that, I start debating numbers. And numbers isn't where most people are emotionally tied to. They're not going to be, because their opinions based on their emotions, and their emotions are not tied to numbers. You're not like, oh, look, I'm saving them by killing 3 of them. You know what I mean? This is my experience and opinion, but that's a difficult way to start. So you have to kind of listen to what anybody you talk to's issue is, find the root cause of it. And this is something I learned, I got better at. I wasn't good at this at first. Definitely not. But you deal with enough suicidal people in law enforcement to learn a couple of things. You never want to tell them you have so much to live for, because if they actually thought that or believed that, they'd never be standing on the ledge in the first place. So that's a pointless argument, right? You can't go up and be like, listen, I'll give it Tony. Hey, Tony, you don't do this. You have so much to live for. And I don't know how censored your show is, or if you can bleep me out. Is this live? Are we?
No, you can say whatever you want.
Okay. They'll look at you and be like, the fuck I do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm here because I have nothing to live for. So what are you saying this to me for? You know what I mean? So you start with, I'm here to listen to you. Please just give me I've had one person, I asked for 5 minutes, and I said, just give me 5 minutes to talk to you. At least I want to get to know you. And about 3 minutes in, I basically had enough on him and information and things I'd already collected on my way to this call, rolling, code, lights and sirens and stuff. Then I learned enough about him to make a connection with him, build a rapport, right? Because if you can't build a rapport with anybody, and you can build rapport with complete strangers, you're not investing in a lifelong friendship, but you're building enough that you can actually have a conversation. So you're having this conversation with this guy. He wants to kill himself. And you don't start with stuff that you think you want to hear or you think they want to hear. You have to figure out what they need to hear. You know what I mean? And that's when you apply the right kind of positions and pointers. So I'm talking to this guy 3 minutes in. I'm like, listen, I like you. I have no problem with you, and I don't see why somebody else would. Maybe you're just with the wrong type of people. And the people you like, they may be important to you. They may be your brother or your sister that hates you, or you think they hate you. But you know what? You're never going to be able to fix anything with them, focusing just on them. There are other people you can hang out with. You have coworkers that like you. Maybe you just never gave them enough of an opportunity. And I can't go down these conversations for a long time, but you learn to talk to people differently when you deal with people who are willing to end their life. You know what I mean? I've seen plenty of people successfully kill themselves, almost kill themselves, and then decide to change their mind. And so you look at people like these people who have opinions or thoughts about hunting, and the way people think doesn't change a lot, from the scenarios law enforcement and to what they're thinking about, as far as hunting and meat and things like that. The process is the same. The math is the same. The numbers are different. You know what I mean? And if you look at them and you go, hey, listen, like if your approach is, we as hunters are conservation people, we're helping everything. Look at us. Look what we've done. They're going to look at you and be like, okay, your science and math is great. That doesn't change the way I feel about what's happening or the way in which it's being done. So then you just look at empathetically, okay, what is your issue? Do you eat meat? And if they say, no, I'm a vegan, then you walk away. No, but if they do, then you have some sort of connection, some place to build a rapport. And if you can build a rapport with somebody, you can talk to them. If you go in thinking, I need their mind to be changed in this conversation, you're making a mistake. You know what I mean? If it's somebody you can have additional conversations with, like, yeah, you could be that guy.
I think the problem exists, Nate, and I'm not arguing with you. I think you have a great point, but I think that what it is that you can't have that conversation every day. The numbers in the science say enough that if you're going to go vote that we have to protect every mountain lion in the state of California, the numbers in the science will defeat that, and they need to be educated, in my opinion, of like, well, wait a minute, that makes sense. Now, I understand that I'm not going to go to every anti-hunter and plead my case of why cougars have to be managed. I don't think that they need to be extinct. I love cougars. I respect cougars. I know what they do for our ecosystem.
You want them to thrive.
I want them to thrive, and I want them to be managed. And I think that the science speaks for itself of, okay, well, here's what cougar hunting does for an area, for tourism, for whatever it is. You can talk money, you can talk revenue, or you can just talk straight science of what it's going to do of wildlife populations being managed. And that's my opinion, is that we manage cougars in the state of Nevada. And if we didn't, we wouldn't have antelope. We wouldn't have mule deer. I'm telling you that straight up. Somebody's managing, here, Nate, before you go on, somebody is managing the cougar population in the state of California. It's just not legal licensed hunters that are spending thousands of dollars in taxidermy, in fuel, hotel rooms, outfitting services, buying their own dogs, training their own dogs. It's just not us anymore. Yeah.
Instead of taxes being generated, it's taxes being spent.
And there's somebody out there controlling the cougar population. We just don't know about it. Or, well, people that are blind to it don't know about it.
People don't get the benefit of it.
And that's why I speak. That's why I speak numbers. And I do agree with what you're saying. Please believe me, I do. But I can't have this conversation with 38 million people that don't hunt in the state of California.
Well, coincidentally, you're talking to somebody who for the last 3 years has been the bane of society, apparently. If you're familiar with ACAB, all cops are bastards, right?
Oh, yeah.
When it comes to trying to convince a load of people, it's an exponential loss when you try to discuss with people like, no, this is not what happens in daily. What is it, George Floyd?
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to go down that path right now, but you look at something like that. And I watched the video. I was a training officer and corporal, and I was like, no, I wouldn't have done what he did. This is me as a cop going like, I don't really see an excuse for doing that. And he's going to pay the price for that, as we all as cops expect to. You know what I mean? If you're like, well, cops shouldn't have to get in trouble. No, they should when they do something stupid.
Sure.
Like a poacher should get in trouble. That doesn't represent hunting. Does a poacher represent hunting to you?
Great analogy. Well, just like in Florida just now, all those deer that Ted Nugent he got the big reward out that were killed in the park, belly shot and suffered and all that. That's not a hunter that did that.
Yeah, that's not people for these things. And so you're talking to somebody who people actively wanted to kill because of what I was a part of. I wasn't born a cop. I agree with that. I wasn't born a cop. They say Black Lives Matter. I was born black. Can't change that. You're not born a cop. You could change that. Yeah, I agree. You're right. I can. I still like what I do, love what I do, feel it's a responsibility and an opportunity to do something great. But I still think that I have, a job to do that is vastly misunderstood, even by people who are pro-cop. You know what I mean? Like, this is not how this works. And so you talk about, the plight of hunters. Well, I don't think a lot of people want to go out, at least not in the numbers that I'm talking about, want to go out and shoot hunters. You know what I mean? Like, hey, let's ambush a bunch of hunters at this mall. And so I can empathize with the difficulties of being a part of a different lifestyle. You know what I mean? And so even then, I say, when you have an opportunity, you talk to people, and you got to do the best you can to be an ambassador to that lifestyle, to that industry, to what it is you want to do. And you talk about voting days. If you're talking to people November 2nd, then you're talking to them way too late. You have plenty of opportunity to talk to people. And 100%. If you don't take it and you don't learn to do it right, You're just blowing your opportunities. Does that mean you need to shove it down their throats? No. Be the kind of person that they can respect, and then they'll listen to you. If you're going to be a dickhead, nobody wants to hear you. I mean,
no, you can't. You have to be educated. You have to be able to present it in the right manner, in the right light. I totally agree. That's why Steven Rinella and Joe Rogan are so key in the plight of hunters and outdoorsmen. And having ambassadors like that is huge for and Ted Nugent, a huge rock star in the 70s and 80s. And maybe Uncle Ted can get a little outspoken, but there's a reason why he is. We need both sides of it. We need a good balance of somebody that's not afraid to go up there and put his neck out there on CNN, because Ted gets to go on all of these platforms. Me as a hunter and on the Outdoor Channel, I only have a small little platform. Joe Rogan's got the podcast platform. He doesn't go on UFC and get in the octagon with Daniel Cormier and go, man, I killed this elk yesterday with this bow and start throwing that lifestyle out there. He does it diligently, you know?
I think the thing about Joe Rogan that's great is that he's exactly, if you watch his show or his podcast or his whatever, and I watch it when I can, when he talks, he's never completely shutting anybody off. He's listening. You know what I mean? And it's that skill set and that personality that makes him so approachable, and people listen to it more. You'd think that listening to somebody else means they wouldn't listen to you. No, being the type of person who hears them, understands what they're saying, and then you kind of call them on certain facts. You know what I mean? Like he does. He makes a point to do that. But
I wonder if it has something to do with his martial arts background, the respect and the discipline of jiu-jitsu and the different disciplines.
Give and take.
Give and take. You know, and like you know, even with Krav Maga, you know, you give everybody like, hey, if you're going to do this, okay, this is the consequence of it. And
this is how we roll.
And this is how we roll. And I think that's very well put. This is another episode of This Life Ain't For Everybody. We are in an unbelievable conversation. Nate, you the man. This lifestyle is awesome. But here's the deal, dude. We haven't even gotten into the lifestyle, really. I had to get some of my thoughts out of what I've learned about you through just conversation, just getting people's opinion about you, your reputation preceding you, your Instagram, which so many of us think that, well, that is the life. Oh, is that really your life? Is it always happy? Is it always smiles? Is it always sunshine? I want to get into this next time we talk. We are going to schedule part 2 with you to talk about some of your most current adventures. I want to hear some stories. I want to hear some conflict. I want to hear some road bumps out there. I want to hear the happy times. I want to hear that there is such things as flat tires. And if you are going to bite off this type of lifestyle, you have to be prepared. You have to know how to make a fire. Were you a Boy Scout, Nate? We're going to talk about all of this, but I want to get into a little bit more of some of the questions I have and what can be encountered in this lifestyle, because you're very well spoken, you're educated, but I do like that give and take. I like that you are very diligent in your approach of talking. Maybe sometimes I might be like, no, you got to give them the science, or no, you got to be pro hunting. There's 10% of us that hunt. There's 10% of us that are against hunting. There's 80% of the population in America that I think is like 340 million people, maybe more than that now, that 80% of them just aren't sure. They might hunt. During the times of COVID, we had a huge uprising, 760% of new fishing licenses. We had a world record number of new hunters coming in. You know what? It's time to keep them. We got to educate them. You saw them out there. We got to teach them how to. There is a right way to do it. Illegal, ethic. We're going to come back. Ethical. We're going to come back with Nate. Remember to visit him on Instagram. Give us the accounts again. You know them by heart.
Yeah, it's going to be Someday Adventure is my more outdoor and adventure channel. Someday Adventure, like someday I'll be a big boy. And then Someday I'll Learn is our family-based stuff, because it's about, you know, family. And then Someday Dad is my fatherhood approach to life and my perspective there.
I love it. I want to schedule part 2. We've just tapped into this lifestyle. I want to come back with this thought. I want you to do some homework on this, which you probably already know this. Social media, the lives we're living on social media. How fake are they? How real are they? Does everybody really live this happy every day, Mr. Nate? I want to talk about this. I want to talk about how you balance it, your real life compared to what you're showcasing on social media, the Instagram, the Facebook platforms. I don't know if you're on Twitter. I don't know if you're on the TikTok, whatever it's called. I want to talk to you about your overall opinion of social media. And are your kids, all 4 of your boys, going to have an iPhone at 10 years, 12 years old with their own accounts to showcase this adventure lifestyle? I want to get into this in part 2 of This Life Ain't For Everybody with Mr. Nate Day. We're going to talk more. Thank you, Leer. Thank you, Bedslide. Thank you, Tag. Thank you all for listening and supporting the partners and sponsors that support us right here at This Life Ain't For Everybody. Please listen to our sister podcast, The Foul Life and Where the Payment Ends, and brand new episodes of The Foul Life TV airing exclusively right now on the Outdoor Channel. We'll be back at you with part 2 of this awesome conversation with Nate Day. Check him out online, all over Instagram. He's got a badass family, a badass lifestyle. I'm proud to know him. I can't wait to meet him in person. Leith Lofton, take us out of here. This is my good friend, Leith Lofton, written by my other good friend and Leith, Drake White, Leith Lofton, a.k.a. Hoss. What you gonna do when the money's all gone?
We're all equal, that's what I think. I don't believe heaven has a bank. Make good use of your time on earth.